Overview of Windows Virtual Machines and Microsoft Azure by Ali Karabrudi. Azure Virtual Machines, or VMs, are one of several types of on-demand scalable computing resources that Azure offers. Typically, you choose a VM when you need more control over the computing environment than other choices offer. In this video, we give you information about what you should consider before you actually create a virtual machine, how you create it, and how you manage it. An Azure VM gives you the flexibility of virtualization without having to buy and maintain the physical hardware that runs it. However, you still need to maintain the VM by performing tasks such as configuring, patching, and installing the software that runs on it. Azure virtual machines can be used in various ways. Some examples are development and test, applications in the cloud, and extended data center. Azure VMs offer a quick and easy way to create a computer with a specific configuration required to code and test an application, which in this case, for any development and test application, you can easily use an Azure virtual machine. Because demand for your application can fluctuate, it might make economic sense to run it on a VM in Azure. You pay for extra VMs when you need them and shut them down when you don't. Virtual machines in Azure can easily be connected to your organization network, and that gives you a huge benefit on the connectivity side. The number of VMs that your application uses can scale up and out to whatever is required to meet your needs at the time. The question that may arise is, what do I need to think about before creating a virtual machine? There are always a multitude of design considerations when you build out an application infrastructure in Azure. These aspects of a VM are important to think about before you start. The names of your application resources, the location where the resources are stored, the size of the VM, the maximum number of VMs that can be created, the operating system that the VM runs, the configuration of the VM after it starts, and the related resources that the VM needs. Speaking of naming, a virtual machine has a name assigned to it and it has a computer name configured as part of the operating system. The name of a VM can be up to 15 characters. If you use Azure to create the operating system disk, the computer name and virtual machine name are the same. If you upload and use your own image that contains a previously configured operating system and use it to create a virtual machine, the name can be different. I recommend that when you upload your own image file, you make the computer name in the operating system and the virtual machine name the same to avoid future confusions and future problems that may arise from having two different names. It is always easier to remember one name rather than two. Regarding the locations, all resources created in Azure are distributed across multiple geographical regions around the world. Usually, the region is called location when you create a VM. For a VM, the location specifies where the virtual hard disks are stored. Regarding the size of the VM that you use is determined by the workload that you want to run. The size that you choose then determines factors such as processing power, memory, and storage capacity. Azure offers a wide variety of sizes to support many types of uses. Azure charges an hourly price based on the VM size and operating system. For partial hours, Azure charges only for the minutes used. Storage is priced and charged separately for sure. Regarding the limits, your subscription actually has a default quota limits in place that could impact the deployment of many VMs for your projects. The current limit on a per subscription basis is 20 VMs per region. Limits can be raised by filing a support ticket requesting an increase. Of course, in that case, Microsoft will charge you differently. Virtual machines use virtual hard disks or VHDs. To store their operating system and data, they always use VHDs. VHDs are also used for the images you can choose and install as an OS. Azure provides many marketplace images to use with various versions and types of Windows Server operating systems. Marketplace images are identified by image publisher, offer, SKU, and version, which typically version is specified as latest. Only 64-bit operating systems are supported. This is important to remember. 32-bit operating systems are not welcome to Azure. For more information on supported suggested operating system roles and features, I always recommend you to check Microsoft documentation before you try a new type of operating system upload. Let's talk a little bit about the extensions. VM extensions give your VM additional capabilities through post-deployment configurations and automated tasks. There are some common tasks that can be accomplished using extensions. Tasks such as run custom scripts, deploy and manage configurations, and collect diagnostic data. The custom script extension helps you configure workloads on the VM by running your script when the VM is provisioned. The PowerShell desired state configuration or DSC helps you set up DSC on a VM to manage configuration and environments. The Azure Diagnostics extension help you configure the VM to collect diagnostic data that can be used to monitor the health of your application. The resources that you see in the current table are used by the VM and need to exist or be created when a VM is created. You need to have a resource group, so the VM must be contained in a resource group. You need to have a storage account, so the VM needs the storage account to store its virtual hard drives into. You need to have a virtual network so that your VM be a member of a virtual network. You need to assign a public IP address to the VM. This is not mandatory. It is necessary just in case you want your computer to be accessible. So the VM can have a public IP address assigned to it to remotely access. You need to have a network interface. That's a mandatory. The VM needs the network interface to communicate in the network. So you usually have the local network of yourself within the Azure. And without the network interface, you don't have a VM. However, you can have no public IP address assigned to your VM, which means it is not accessible publicly through the web. Another characteristics, another resource, which is not mandatory but it's always good to exist in your VM, is data disks. The VM can include data disks to expand storage capabilities. So let's talk about how do we create our first VM. You have several choices for creating your VM. The choice that you make depends on the environment you're in. The table that you're looking at right now provides information to get you started creating your VM. You can either do it through the Azure portal which we're going to do it in this class. You can do it through the templates, which is going to use Microsoft Virtual Machines with a Resource Manager template. You can use the Azure PowerShell and use the command lines in order to get this creation done. You can use client SDKs, which basically is deploying Azure resources using C#. We can use REST APIs, or you can use the Azure CLI itself. You hope it never happens, but occasionally something goes wrong. If this situation happens to you, you can easily look up in different troubleshoot resources that Microsoft has uploaded as documentation for Azure. So let's think about it. How do we manage the VMs after we create them? VMs can be managed using a browser or using the CLI PowerShell. If you use PowerShell or the portal online on the web, no matter which one to use, you can have access to all the capabilities of Microsoft Azure to manage the VMs. Some typical management tasks that you might perform are getting information about a VM, logging on to a VM, managing availability, and making backups. The table you're looking at right now shows you some of the ways that you can get information about a VM. You can go to the Azure portal. On the Hub menu, you can click on Machines, and then select the virtual machine from the list. And on the blade for Microsoft Virtual Machines, you have access to overview information, setting values, changing values, monitoring metrics, looking at the cost, and so on and so on. You can use Azure PowerShell. For information about using PowerShell, look at the video that I already have uploaded and see how to set it up. You can use REST API, use the get VM information operation to get information about a VM, and you can use client SDKs. Last but not the least again is the Azure CLI. So after you create your virtual machine, next step is going to be logging onto the VM. You use the connect button in the Azure portal to start a remote desktop session or an RDP. Things can sometimes go wrong when trying to use a remote connection. If the situation happens to you, again, you can go back to the information posted in the Troubleshoot Remote Desktop Connection to an Azure Virtual Machine running Windows on the Microsoft documentation website. Let's talk a little bit about managing the availability of your virtual machine. It's important for you to understand how to ensure high availability for your application. This configuration involves creating multiple VMs to ensure that at least one is running. In order for your deployment to qualify for your 99.95 VM service level agreement, you need to deploy 2 or more VMs running your workload inside an availability set. This configuration ensures your VMs are distributed across multiple fault domain and are deployed onto hosts with different maintenance windows. You can always go online and check the Azure SLA, which explains the guaranteed availability of an Azure as a whole. But the rule of the thumb is if you only have one VM, Microsoft does not certify 99.95% VM service level agreement that they have. Minimum of 2 is required in order to be able to get that number. Like any other operating system for enterprise use or commercial use, you need to back up the VMs on the Azure. A recovery service vault is used to protect data and assets in both Azure Backup and Azure Site Recovery services. You can use a recovery service vault to deploy and manage backups for Resource Manager deployed VMs using the PowerShell. This basically gets us to the point of a start creation of a VM. Okay, let's start creating our first virtual machine. So first you need to log into your Azure instance. Right now, as you can see, I'm already logged in. By this point, you must have an account or you cannot follow the information and instructions from this point on. If you have any questions regarding how to create an account, please search for the video named How to Create a Free Account with Microsoft Azure and follow the steps in that video. So I want you to go to Create a Resource up here and click on it. And from the search box, we're going to look for Server 2016 Data Center and choose the data center. So just go ahead and switch this to the Resource Manager. Take a look at what you're installing. So you're installing Windows Server 2016 Data Center, which is a comprehensive server actually that we're going to use mostly in this class. The image can be used with Azure Hybrid Benefit for Windows Server. We're going to discuss what this is in near future. Some legal terms that you can go ahead and read or just simply save it for later read. Publisher is Microsoft and documentation is available here. I always encourage you to click on the documentation, go there and read everything that they have to offer about this specific operating system VM. Introducing to Windows 2000 Server 2016 again is going to help you understand the Windows itself and what's new and learn more. So this basically are for your further study by your own. At this point, I want you to click on Create and your instance is going to be created. So in the Basics tab, let's go under Project Details. Again, I'm under the Basics tab after creation of the resource. And then I'm going to the Project Details. And I want you to make sure the correct subscription is selected and then choose Create New. But look at it. So the subscription that I have is a free trial. As you can see, there's no other option for me as of now. If you're planning on keeping this copy of Microsoft Windows Server 2016 Data Center in future, don't worry, you're going to have it for free. So the resource group, you can create your own groups. It doesn't matter what group you actually create. It's going to help a lot in managing your resources over here. So I create a new group and name it Test VMs for CCSF, and basically click OK on that. Now it's going to be under that resource group. Next step is naming the virtual machine. That I want you to notice what the requirements that Microsoft has assigned for naming the virtual machine. So virtual machine name cannot contain non-ASCII or special characters. So that is sometimes funny, but this is something to put into consideration. The virtual machine name must be unique in the current resource group. And remember, this is the resource group that we are talking about, which is the test VMs for CCSF. So that means if you have two different resource groups, you can have the same names, the exact same name within those two groups, and there's not going to be no problem. Coming back here, I'm going to go ahead and start naming it to see it again. So the value should be between 1 to 15 characters. So to make stuff easy, I just put it down 2016 Server Data Center, as you can see, it is one more character. Actually, I'm going to keep it at 2016 server. So as long as you're meeting all these requirements, you're good to go, and you should not have no problem. So the region is going to be East US as of now, but if you like to put it in any other region, then you're more than welcome. It is okay to put it in any region that you want. I keep East US as I always had good experience with that region. And the availability options, as you can see, you can put it in an availability set. Remembering from the lecture, remember if you want to put it in an availability set, that means you're going to have two different servers that must be added over here to back each other up. So as of now, I'm going to leave it alone like that. I don't really care about this to be available as this is just a test. And the image is already selected. If you like to select any other image, you can look for those images over here, but I'm going to keep 2016 data center. So this is exactly like when you're using your hypervisor on your desktop and you introduce an ISO. So this basically is going to be that ISO. So scrolling down, you're going to get to your administrative account. Before I get there, look at the size that is assigned to the virtual hard drive over here. So under the administrator account, you want to introduce a local admin. So I'm going to call it CNIT admin. Again, look at the requirements for the name. So username cannot contain special characters. Username must not include reserved words, and the value should be between 1 to 32 characters long. I have seen a lot of people not considering the limits on username, passwords, and such that get two different problems and complain about my Azure instance doesn't work and so on and so on. So always read the documentation when you are a beginner with Microsoft Azure. Later down the road, then you can simply ignore those as you already know them. So the password again has the same type of requirement that you're gonna read to it, and there you go. I actually prefer to put it like that. And there you go. So I have it over there, and then I'm gonna confirm the password, and the passwords match. Always remember what you have over here as username and password, as recovery is a little bit not let's say amazing. So it's good to remember that, taking notes somewhere. So after you have passwords and everything set up, then you have to go for inbound and outbound rules. So we define these rules based on what we are planning to do with this instance of Windows Server 2016 Data Center. Because we want to remotely connect to it, I'm going to go ahead and allow some ports for our connection. And you can actually guess that I want to open up the RDP and HTTP. So HTTP is open and RDP is open, so I can remotely connect to it. Again, this is something that you have to remember and consider. If you don't open up those over here and forget to change them later in the configurations, it is not going to be possible to remotely connect to those, especially the RDP and HTTP in this case. So I want you to leave the remaining settings, which is the save money, aside. Here is asking you if you have a license to Microsoft Windows Server, so it can give you some discounts. As of now, we don't pay for this instance anyway, so just click on next. Let me just get rid of this save. Actually, I'm going to save it. It may be useful for future. So create a virtual machine. We have either premium SSD, standard SSD, or standard HDD. This is referring to the actual physical device that Microsoft is going to assign to you on their own servers. So Since we're not paying anything, I'm going to keep premium SSD for this case. It's not going to cost me anything, so it doesn't matter. And then the data links over here, I want you to just leave it as is. And under the networking, as you can see, everything is already set up for this specific server. Just don't touch anything, don't change anything. We're going through these pages so that you can have an idea of what is included, but I don't want you to change anything over there because with the defaults we can actually do whatever we want in this class. Guest config is disabled, and finally the tags if you want to add a tag, which we're going to talk about this later when we talk about the pricing. So finally click on review plus create, and here we go. And as you can see, the validation passed. So we validated this specific server. Remember one thing, the credit that we apply is almost like 12 cents an hour for having this working. So that's good to know that the prices from Microsoft are not that expensive, but at the same time, if you keep the server up and running at all the times, you're gonna pay a hefty amount of money in the long run. So take advantage of that $200 free credit that you have for the 30 days, which is a good amount of time to do some practices around and learn through that. And then after that, make sure that you know how much you're paying. Okay, very good. So it is important to have those in mind. Anyway, coming down here, the subscription is free trial, so we're good with that. The resource group was the one that I generated, test VMs for CCSF. Virtual machine name 2016 server is again what I created. The region is East US. Again, I want you to keep this East US. You're going to get much better performance, especially considering the location we are in. Availability options, I didn't add no infrastructure redundancy over there. Username, CNIT admin. The public protocols available are HTTP and RDP. And already have a Windows license. No, I don't have it. We wanted premium SSDs. Use managed disk. Yes, blah, blah, blah. And I'm happy with all the reviewed information over here. So I click on create. That's going to initialize the deployment, submitting the deployment. As you can see, these are all time tagged. So now my instance is actually up and running within a couple of seconds as soon as this guy is over. As you can see, it's still working. So what you can see is under the deployment details, so you can see the duration that I'm having this up and running is going up. So very simple. My deployment is over there and I'm good to go at this point. Since we're going to go back and forth to this page a lot of time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this button over here to pin it to my dashboard. So every time I go back to my dashboard, I can actually see this page quickly and just jump into it. So now that our instance is actually deployed, as you can see, it says your deployment is complete. Now we can go ahead and try to remotely connect to it. Before we move there, I want you to look at this list over here. I have my resources, my group, and everything up and running. This is what we love to see. So anytime you see an orange over here, and don't worry, we're going to go over every single instance later and discuss what does it mean. But every time you see an orange here, which means something is not working. Red, it's broken. It needs your attention. So if you go through other steps throughout the labs in this course and you figure out something is not happening, you cannot connect somewhere or do something over there, come back and make sure your deployment is going well. And I can click here to go to the resource, which is going to be my 2016 server. So we're going to discuss how everything in here is going to work. However, for now, let's just go back and get ready to remotely connect to this deployment of Microsoft Windows Server. Okay, so let's start from how to get access to our virtual machine. Let's say you just logged in to your homepage and you want to get access to your virtual machine and look at how is it doing. You need to go here to the resource groups, and through those resource groups you're going to see all the resource groups that you already have created. If you remember, I created this test VMs for CCSF, so I click on that, and under the resources within this group I have everything that Microsoft assigned to me, which all of them are actually in a package to run 2016 server my machine. So I click on that, and it opens up the 2016 server with all the properties. So basically, this view that you're looking at is called the server property. You can stop the server, restart it, or simply just delete it, refresh it, capture the situation, and other stuff to do to this server. You can also see the CPU usage of this server as of right now. So to continue, I'm going to come back here. I want you guys to click on the connect to get to this page, and this connect to virtual machine page. Okay, I want you to keep the default options to connect by DNS name over port 3389. So this is something that I want you to keep for now. Do not change anything. Do not do anything specific to it. SSH is going to stay the same. So after you have this setting over here, again, make sure this is correct. I want you to click on the download RDP file. Okay, now that the RDP file got downloaded, we just need to use an RDP client, remote desktop client, in order to get connected to this instance. Yeah, you see this because I just stopped and restarted my server just to make sure it's working properly before the next step. Anyway, for those of you who have Windows, so the game is very easy. You have everything in there. If you're a Mac user, you're going to need to download a remote desktop client. So just in case, let me just pretty much pull up this guy over here. So very simple, go to your App Store on the Mac and put in remote desktop client. The latest version is 10, which is this guy. Click on get, and of course install it on your computer. So now that we have the connection file, the RDP file, and the remote desktop application set up either on Mac, and click on the connection file, which is going to ask us for the username password. At this point, you want to put in the username password that you actually created while creating this instance of Server 2016. Let's hope I still remember my password, and it's going to tell you that the certificate is not valid. Just click on continue and accept. It's configuring the remote PC, and let me just minimize it so we can see it. And then we are in the process of getting connected to the remote desktop. So now we are connected to the Microsoft Windows Server. That's a remote connection, and as you can see, it has all the familiar interface that you know from Windows Server 2016. So that pretty much is it. As easy as you just noticed, we created an instance of 2016 server, and we remotely get connected to it through our RDP client. And then from here, you can go wherever you want and you can do whatever you want with that. So I'm going to go back to our interface and stop the server. As you know, every second is going to be money now. So click on stop. It's asking me if I want to stop my virtual machine. Stop it. As you can see, I can get the message over there. And let's go back as soon as it's over. We're going to go back to the home. And that concludes this video. Good luck with practicing it yourself. Try to do a couple of times. It's very easy. It's just going through steps, and I'm pretty sure you guys are going to be successful in this.